So we got an amazing section today. Let's see if I should keep the glasses on. An amazing section, my favorite section. I was waiting for this for a long time. The unknown friend will finally appear. So the story so far. Once upon a time, there was a man who wandered around the earth looking for a place to live. Finally, he saw a nice place, and he met a beautiful woman there. The woman agreed to marry him and let him live in that place with her, and he enjoyed his life there with the woman, but rather selfishly. However, since he was following her lead constantly, his mind became habituated to rely on her. So after he died, although he was punished for all the selfish things that he had done while living in that city, the thing which remained in his mind was his dedication to this dharmic woman. So in his next life, he became a dharmic woman. In the next life, he marries the person who he marries is a very, very wise man, a man who has wisdom about what's real and what's unreal, and that inspires in her the first daughter, which their first daughter was inspiration to discover what's truly real, what we don't realize is real. And then uh, she and he give up ordinary life and they go to the forest, to the mountain, actually, the forest mountain, to concentrate, to meditate. And they perform a lot of serious meditation. And so finally, the king, who's the intellect in the allegory, the husband, he realizes his meditation becomes successful, let's say, and he ceases to feel the need to function externally. The sound is cutting in and out. Oh, I know what to do. Just a second. Un momento. Here. This will make it better. This will be better. All right. So, so I guess I have to restart. Actually, everything I just said was just like a review of what's been going on so far. So now we get to the new spot. So the new spot is the intellect meditating on everything realizes that everything's the same. Whatever happens, happens, and it's always got good and bad to it. It realizes that everything is the same. So, therefore, thinks, what's the point in making any decisions? No matter what you decide, everything is going to wind up the same. So the intellect ceases to function, and in the story, this means that the husband, dies. So now, in the story, we pick up to hear what does the Vidarbhi, the main character, what does she do now? Okay? So here's what she does. Vidarbhi, actually, it's more than that about the intellect. It wasn't just that the intellect realized that everything is the same, it also realized that there's something better to do. If everything is the same, it doesn't necessarily mean that you shouldn't do anything. But the intellect realized that in the external world, everything is equally desirable or undesirable. But there's this amazing reality called Hari, which is this amazing being that's delightful. And so it ceased to function externally and instead wanted to absorb itself in Hari. Okay, so that's how the husband, that's the allegory of the husband dying in his meditation. So now, what's Vidarbhi? Now starts to talk about Vidarbhi, the main character. Vidarbhi considered her husband Malayadvaja to be divine because he comprehended and adhered to the supreme essence of reality. So this is called Pati Devata. It's very much abused concept. It's where the concept is the same, and also in the allegory here, this Pati represents a spiritual guru. In the allegory previously, when the main character was male and the wife was intellect, the wife was Dharma Patni, which is she represents integrity. So in his previous life, the intellect was integrity oriented, and that's how it got him a good birth. Now in this life, he gets intellect, which represents a spiritual guide. So the goal of life changes. In the previous birth, the goal of life was dharma, but in this life, the goal of life is moksha. So anyway, she considers the husband to be divine. Why? Because he's her husband? No, because he comprehended and adhered to the supreme essence of reality. He was Parama Dharmagya. Patim Parama Dharmagya. Pati Devata. Malayadvaja Pati Devata. Okay? That's the way it works. It's not a formality. If you have somebody or something in your life that comprehends something, then they become the representative of that thing. So because Malayadvaj, she could see and experience that Malayadvaj, her husband, comprehended reality, and comprehended it so deeply that he adhered to it. He could harmonize with it. That caused her to feel that this guy's divine. So because of that, she was fully devoted to him. Vidarbhi considered her husband Malayadvaj to be divine because he comprehended and adhered to the supreme essence of reality. Out of love, she renounced all pleasures and took care of him carefully. So while he's doing meditation, she's doing meditation and helping him do his meditation. So things like, where do you get, okay, you only eat a little bit, but where do you get the food from? She would take care of it. You get uncomfortable a little bit from asanas, right? So you have to stop your meditation. But not if you have somebody help you do the asana. You can do it longer. So she would help him do the asana. Keep the blood flowing in his legs, for example. So out of love, she renounced all pleasures and took care of him carefully while he was doing this austerity in the forest. And so she also became just like him. So the next statement is, her clothes were torn, her body was emaciated, and her hair was knotted in clumps. She shined peacefully near her husband like the brilliant coals of a smokeless fire. So this is a lot like Kapila's mother when she was doing austerities with Kapila's father. Because women are naturally beautiful, but when they do austerities, the beauty gets subdued. Because you're not eating much, you're not combing, right? You're not decorating, combing, maintaining your physical appearance, but you're still beautiful. But it gets, so she's described as looking like coals, smoldering coals. Because the fire is not really showing itself, but it's still in there and obvious. Her clothes torn, her body emaciated, her hair knotted in clumps, she shined peacefully near her husband like the brilliant coals of a smokeless fire. When her dearmost passed away, his body remained in its meditative posture. So he passed away while in asana and meditation, so it didn't just fall over. His asana was so sthira that it actually didn't require any muscular effort to keep. The balance was so perfect that even though he had died, that body didn't fall out of the asana. So she didn't know he was dead. When his dearmost passed away, his body remained in its meditative posture, so unaware of what had happened, she came to care for him. But when she noticed that there was no warmth at all in his feet, because she's going to rub this, because this is where you get the blood flow is the most difficult to get. When she noticed that there was no warmth at all in her feet, her heart despaired like a doe whose mate is lost. Without a partner, she wept for her poor self. Tears of hopelessness drenched her breasts as she broke into a howling sob that echoed through the trees. Any questions so far here? Yes, synchronize with the universe. My recommendation is victorcara.com/books. Yes, Bardo, exactly. All right, so let's continue on with this. So he died. She didn't even know that he died because his life was so unexternal in the first place that he would spend all day sitting in the asana and meditating. And after he died, he remained in the asana, so she just thought everything was normal. And she goes up to massage his legs, and she realizes they're completely cold. And then she realizes that he's dead. And then she starts to cry, and then her cry breaks into a howl. And remember, she's in the mountain forest, so it's super lonely. She's only there with this guy, and this guy is gone now. She's completely by herself. So she says, "Wake up, O sage of kings, wake up. The world surrounded by water," which means this continent, "is terrified of villains and warriors. You must protect her." So she's trying to arouse his chivalry. It's interesting because even though it was a long time ago that he was involved in actively being a king, she responds to something that might bring the fire of life back, which is the passion to do something that he was inclined to do. But of course he was just dead, completely dead. So he didn't wake up. Pleading like this, the girl who followed her husband into the wilderness fell down. That sentence is there to impress on you the thing that I just said. She's all alone now. Pleading like this, the girl who followed her husband into the wilderness fell down, and her tears washed her feet. So first her tears are falling on her breast, but then when she falls, her tears wash her feet. It's really, really, really poignant and poetic. It's like the last service that she'll do for him is to wash his feet with her tears. You can't really fake that. Actually, so the last thing that she's going to do. The last thing that she's going to do is what we call the final, what do they call it? Last rites, right? So finally, eventually, she pulls herself together and she does the last thing she has to do for him, which is the funeral. So eventually she collected wood and gathered it into a pyre and placed her husband's body atop it. So some things about this are a little bit interesting, because for most women it's pretty difficult to pick up a man. But Vidarbhi, who herself is emaciated, could manage it. So there's two interesting things about this. Is when you have to do something, you do it. But the other thing is this guy was not heavy. This guy was just skin and bones because of going so many years, right? It actually said thousands of years, going so many years of eating just flowers and stuff like that. So eventually she collected wood, gathered it into a pyre, and placed her husband's body atop it. Yeah. Eventually she collected wood and gathered it into a pyre and placed her, setting it ablaze. So she lit it on fire. and then lighting the wood on fire made her heart just practically die. So her heart is described as hopeless, and she wanted to die with him. So she says, "Oh Prabhu," she cried very loudly, "Oh Prabhu." Prabhu is a way that you address somebody who has a lot of power, influence. So if somebody's very influential over you, you call them Prabhu. So this is a way that a wife often addresses a husband, or it's a way that a citizen can address the mayor, right, or the person who's governing the town or the city, the king. But ultimately, the word Prabhu, the word Bu, like Bu, Bhuta. Bu means power, energy, being, the ability to manifest something. Manifestation is Bu. Prabhu means somebody from whom Bu comes, from whom the ability to manifest things comes. This is also why it refers to the husband, because the husband gives semen. Then the wife can make Bhuta, a child. So actually, the proper object for the noun Prabhu, the proper thing that it refers to, is actually Atma, which is spirit, because spirit is the source from which manifestation comes, and then the proper spirit is Paramatma, the super spirit. So when she cries Prabhu, in her mind she's calling for her husband, but the real Prabhu uses it as an opportunity to respond. So this is where all of a sudden something interesting happens. And I think here I'll start to share the Sanskrit with you. Yeah, chat can be very distracting. You don't have to even look at it. Most of the time I don't. Just put some window over it. And then when I want to look at it, I look at it. So here's this. Tatra purvatara kashchit sakha brahmana atmavan. This is so mysteriously worded, amazingly worded. Santvayang valguna samya tam aha rudantim prabhu. So while she cried Prabhu, then suddenly somebody appeared. Someone who's described as a brahmana, or a very philosophical or teacher type of person. So he would appear, the dress that he would be in. Most societies you could tell a person's status or role in society by the way that they dress. So like if you're a king or a warrior, you dress a certain way. If you're a teacher or philosopher, you dress differently. Not really even so much intentionally, but just as a byproduct of who you are. So she saw this guy appear out of nowhere. Kashchit, somehow. This Sakha, a friendly looking Brahmana, appeared Atmavan just from himself. But Atmavan is so suggestive as a word, as if from herself. He appeared from herself. So he says, just then, this is the translation, just then, when she cried, "O Prabhu," someone appeared beside her. A friendly, philosophical, self-possessed person whom she felt she somehow already knew. This way he's described as Sakha, or a friend. Calmly, he spoke sympathetic and conciliatory words to her. If this is a movie, this would be great, because if this is a movie, you have a big funeral pyre burning in the background while this is happening. So what does he say? Brahmana Uvacha. He says, Katvam kashyasi kovayam. Shayano yasya shochasi. Janasi kim sakayam mam ninagre vichichartaha. This is really very, very wonderful. Interesting. So what does he say first? Anybody want to try to guess a translation of katvam? Katvam. What do you think katvam means? Katvam. Ka means what? Or it's just a question word. So what do you think twa means? Tvam. It's this. If you speak Spanish or any of the Latin languages, you got a word tu. It comes from the word twa. Yeah. Katwa. Anybody want to guess? There's this lag, but who you? Exactly, Raju. But you probably know that. You probably grew up with this language. So who are you? That was his first question to her. Who are you? Who are you? Kasyasi kovayam. Kasyasi kovayam shaino yasya sochati. So basically altogether this means who are you? And what's your connection to this dead man that you're crying over? There's a man here who's lying down or who's dead. And on this burning, on this pyre. And you're crying. So what's your relationship with this guy? Who are you and what's your relationship with this guy that you're crying about? So she's going to reply that he's the Prabhu, right? So her reply is, well, he's my husband and he's basically my guru. He was doing meditation and I was following him. Now he's gone. So then the Brahmana says, Janasi kim sakyamam. Do you know who I am? Do you know who I am? Janasi kim mam. Do you know me? And her answer to that, this is very interesting. Who are you? What's your relation to that guy? Do you know me? And her reply is Sakaya. Sakaya, I think that you're my friend. Yinagre Vichichartaha. I think that you're my friend whom I have wandered with since before I can remember. Yenagre means since before this. Vichacharta means we wandered around. Ha, I guess, I think. Sakayam, you're the friend that I have been wandering around with forever. I think that's you. Do you know who I am? I think you're the friend that I've been wandering around with forever. Pretty amazing. Next statement is, come on, give me the next page. You can do it, Mr. Internet. Well, I might as well check. Okay. Now he asks, Api smanasi chatmanam avigyata sakam sake hitva mam padam anvichan bhoma bhogarato gata. So now he asks her, he reminds her, I'm sorry, but that's what the word api means. I'm sorry, but you didn't answer my first question. My first question is, who are you? You told me that this guy is your Prabhu, and you told me that I'm your friend. But you didn't answer the question of who are you? Perhaps you slightly remember yourself. If you know that I'm your friend, then you must know who you are, because you must know that you're my friend. Perhaps you slightly remember that you're my friend if you slightly remember that I'm your friend. Apismarasi chatmanam avigyata sakam sakhe. Do you know yourself at all, that you're the friend of this unknown friend? She says she's exhausted, so she says, I can't remember anything. I do not know who I truly am. I cannot make sense of it. So please explain. Help me make sense of my shattered memory. So the soul has shattered memory. It has memory, bits and pieces of memory, but it has post-traumatic stress disorder, and it has all those things that we identify in psychology as the ways that the intellect refuses to deal with memory, which interrupts the way that it wants to operate. It doesn't process memory, and so it has fragmented memory, and it has bits of amnesia in between these fragments, and so it doesn't really understand itself. The soul doesn't really understand its history, but it has fragmental cognition of who and what it is. So here, this person who suddenly appeared from her is saying, do you know who you are? Do you know who I am? She says, well, I think you're my friend. I feel like you're my friend, and we've been together for a long time. So he says, well, then maybe you understand who you are. And she says, but I don't. I just barely have an idea. You help me. You explain it. So he... Is this the end? No, there's more. So he... this is what's going to happen next in the story, is he's going to explain to her her memory, which means, as far as... Remember, this is a story that Narada is telling King Prachinibari. So what this unknown friend, this Brahmana, is going to do now is explain the story. So you're going to get... The explanation of the allegory is going to come from this Brahmana now. But there's some things now that he's going to reveal first, which are from before the story started, which is very interesting. So it's even here in the second half of this verse, Hitva mam padam anvichan bhauma bhogaratogata. So this means that she did not have interest in the friend. Hitva mam. Some people think hitva means something that you give up. So some people think that she neglected the friend, in the sense of, once upon a time we were friends, but then she decided she didn't like the guy and then she went away. But that's not what hitva means. Hitva means ignoring, or neglecting, overlooking, not paying attention to something is hitva. So because she's not paying attention to the friend, then she padam anvichan, she wanders away from the friend. And where does she go? Gata, she goes to bhumi, the world which is manifest and tangible and externally expressed. So instead of having attention or interest in what is the internal essence, and remember, this is what is the basis of her whole life. Her first daughter was asitekshana, which means the fruit of her marrying Maladhvaj was that she got a strong passion and interest in understanding the true essence of what is actually real and pleasurable and enjoyable in existence. So now this Brahman is explaining that's your problem, is that you didn't know that. You don't know what the essence is. Instead of having attention on the essence of reality, you ignore the essence of reality, and instead your attention goes to the external form of it. Hitva mam padaman vichan. Because you have ignorance of me, you wander from me. 2, your attention wanders from me to Bhoma bhoga, trying to enjoy rata. Your passion goes not towards me, but to trying to enjoy the externally manifest world. If you look inward to the essence of reality, then you feel that you're rooted on that essence. But if you look outward from the essence of reality, then you feel that the manifestation of reality is rooted on you. Like if you look in towards the sun, you feel like you're orbiting the sun. But if you look out from the sun, you might feel like you're the most important thing. Similarly, if you look inward towards the supersoul, you feel rooted on it. But when you look outward towards the externally manifest world, you don't see the supersoul. So you feel to be the supersoul. Hitva mam padaman vichan bhoma bhogarata. Any questions on that? Go ahead. Because this is a wide, for people who are experienced with this philosophy and the organizations and people that are practicing this stuff, that is a very misunderstood verse, 428:53, in the English speaking world. Any questions? It's, of course, who is this friend, Alpha say? It's her friend. Who do you think it is? Who would the soul be eternally friends with? And who is really not quite different from itself, that comes out from itself, shows itself as a part of itself. It's the super soul. Alf, why must we have this confusion? Because you're an entity with will. Because the essence of reality is pleasure. That's why the entities who participate in reality have will. Because pleasure is not robotic or programmed or forced. Pleasure is when something comes to you because it wants to. It's not when something comes to you because it has to. So the way that the reality is manifest by the supreme enjoyer is that the components of reality have their own will. That's what's enjoyable. And because the components have their own will, they can do whatever they want with their will. That's what it means to have will. So because they can do whatever they want with their will, there's going to be some portion of them, however small, who don't go towards Bhagavan. The enjoyable part is to see what comes towards you. That means some things must not come towards you. And that may make your hunger higher to enjoy, which is the whole point of existence. The whole point of consciousness is to enjoy, to have fun. So for that reason, the entities that manifest in reality have will, and because they have will, some of them don't submit themselves to Bhagavan. And that's why. Hi, Irene. Thank you for not harassing today. All right. So this is really interesting. This next thing is really great. So he's going to now, the Brahmana is now going to give an explanation, because the way that he's framing the explanation is, you didn't have any interest in me, so you went to this externally manifested thing. He's going to now explain how the two of them have been together forever. How they've been friends forever. Since even... Now, forever is not a concept that exists on a timeline where there's minute A, minute B, minute C, minute D, and then all the minutes together are taken as forever. Forever is... A, B, C, D is not consequential. So, you know what I mean? The forever is not a long span of time. Time is not imposing. So it's not really that before this happened, before she came to the external world, she was in a different place. It's not like that. There's no before. This is why it's called anadi. Anadi literally means there is no before. But he's going to explain how they exist together even when she's not manifesting herself in the external world. So he says, Hang Sao. We are two swans. Can you imagine? Can you put yourself in her shoes? She has been practicing severe austerity in the forest for years. And now her husband died and she's burning her husband's body, and suddenly this being appears that looks like a philosopher and is asking her questions and telling her things, and he says, Hang Sao. We are two swans. Actually, what he says is Hang Sao Aham Chatvam. You and I are two swans. Hang Sao Aham Chatvam Charya Sakhayao Manasanayo Abhutam Antara Vaukha Sahasra Parivatsaran. Oh noble, and so he calls her Arya, which means that she's noble. You and I, oh noble one. So what does noble mean? Noble means your birth is good, right? Your origin is high. So what he's saying is your origin is high. Let's talk about the origin. The origin is that you and me are the same. I'm a swan and you're a swan. So he says, you and I, O noble one, are two swans, two friends. We're like a swan couple. We lived out in nature without manifesting any nest for thousands of years. It's so cool. So, the footnote on this, yes, I think it was Alf. Yes, this is Paramatma. The friend is Paramatma, the root form of the self. Both the soul and the super soul, so super soul means Paramatma, both the soul and the super soul are equally glorious and of exactly the same nature. He didn't say, you're a swan and I'm a swan, but I'm a nice white swan and you're an ugly black swan. Or I'm a swan and you're a swan, but I'm huge and you're tiny. He just said, you're a swan and I'm a swan. And you're noble. Because he's highlighting that your actual inherent nature is the same as mine. Both the soul and the super soul are equally glorious and of exactly the same nature. They do not need to manifest a city, a nest. They do not need to manifest a city or a home to live in. They're self-manifesting. There is no need to manifest a body. They inherently have their own form through which they can interact. So they didn't need to build a nest. But since the soul is unaware of the super soul, its passion is attracted instead towards the external powers of divinity. That's Bhuta Bhoga Rata. To interact with this external power, the soul needs that power to provide it with a home or a city to inhabit. So remember, this whole story begins with there's a guy who's looking for a home, looking for a place to live. He's wandering the earth looking for a place to live. So what the friend is saying is, before you were this guy looking for a place to live, you were a swan who lived on this lake in nature, in your own nature. You didn't need a home. And you lived with me. That's where I live. So then the next thing that he says, Satvam vihayamam bandho gato gramyamatir mahim vicharan padam adrakshi kayachin nirmitam striya. My friend, that swan, you, was unaware of this swan, me. Vihaya satvam, that you, was vihaya mam, was unaware of me, your friend Bandhu. That swan, you, was unaware of me. All of your thoughts went instead towards what you might acquire out there in the great world. Gramya matir, mahim, out there in the great world that's manifest. Mahim, that's what the universe is called, mahim, the great manifestation. Out there in this great world, gramya, gra, means to take. Gramya mati means to have a mentality that you want to accumulate things. You looked out at the great world instead of looking at me, and when you looked at the great world, you thought it should belong to me. Because you're not looking at me, you don't know who it belongs to. My friend, that swan, you, was unaware of me. All of your thoughts went instead towards what you might acquire out there in the great world, and so there you wandered, wanting to see whatever it could give birth to. Vicharan padam ad. So because all of your thoughts went there, that's where vicharan, that's where you went. And you wanted to see a drakshi, kaschin nirmitam striya. What could it give birth to? What could this, and the word striya means what can expand, but striya also means woman, because women have kids. Because women have babies, they're called striya. They produce children, so they expand things. They expand the population, they make a family grow. So they are striya. So the world itself is also striya, because it expands from the power of the soul. It expands. Mm-hmm. So there's a little bit of meaning in here. This could be translated to, you wandered there experiencing what the woman would create. The same words, vicharan padam adrakshi kasyachin nirmitam striya, could be translated as you went there because you wanted to see what this woman, who the mahim, the great manifested power, what she would create, what she would give birth to. So who is this woman? The woman refers to two things. The intellect, which is devoted to seeing the world, or more precisely to Prakriti herself, the goddess of manifestation. So in other words, you want to see what would this goddess, Prakriti, the external power of God, what would it manifest? The manifesting power of God. Women manifest. They bring forth something. The male has a hidden power. It puts it in a woman, and then the woman manifests it. So the manifesting power is feminine and goddess. The manifesting investor of the power is male God. And the Brahman is telling the Vidarbhi, you were interested to see what she would give birth to. So you went out there. It also indicated that the swan leaving the lake has a masculine attitude. That's also why she's described as a woman. Because typically the male gets attracted to a feminine thing. So if the soul gets attracted to the super soul, then it's getting attracted to a masculine thing. But if the soul gets attracted to the external world, then it gets attracted to a feminine thing. So if the soul attracted to the external world takes a male attitude, the soul attracted to the internal thing takes a female attitude. And because of this, he's describing the thing that the swan was attracted to as being female. So what does it mean, masculine attitude? It means to feel adventurous, to feel independent, to not care about relationships. That's a masculine trait. So, for example, she was leaving this friend. She didn't care. Maybe there's a friend in this lake. She didn't care about who's in the lake with her. She's going to leave. So that's a masculine thing. Seeking treasure, seeking pleasure, conquering things, going to a new land is a very masculine thing. Staying at home is a feminine thing. Going out is a masculine thing. And that's it for today. Because the next statement is going to... Now, this is the prequel to the story. The story that we've heard so far began with once upon a time there was a man who had a friend that he didn't even know, but was wandering around all over the earth looking for a place to live. That's how the story began. So now that this friend who he didn't even know he had is manifest, what the friend is spoken about in these 3 verses is what was before the story started. Before the story started, you were a swan living in a lake with me, but you didn't even know I was there. And because you didn't know I was there, your attention was drawn out of the lake. And then you came out to this world looking for a home. From the place where you didn't even need a home, you went out looking for a home. Now that that part of the story is done, it's going to pick up and he's going to start explaining the story that you've already heard and know. So he's going to say, remember you found this city? It had 9 gates. What were those 9 gates? Blah, 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 blah. He's going to explain what they are. So now it's going to be like the explanation of the allegory. So we'll pick that part up next week. Next Thursday. For me, Thursday. I guess for you guys, it's still Wednesday night. Good. Any questions? No, if you get attracted to masculine, then you must have a feminine attitude. Unless, of course, it's homosexual, but we're not really going to take that into account right now because it's complex. We're just going to be simple and say that masculine energy is attracted to feminine energy is attracted to masculine energy. There's a lot of complication and subtlety to it, which can make it appear that masculine things are attracted to feminine things. But actually, north polarity is attracted to south polarity to north polarity. Any else? You shouldn't eat animals. It's terrible. All right, guys, that's it. What you can do is... Wait, here's a question from Bardo. Can we say the tangible world exists only for the reason that source consciousness friend wants to get reflected and see itself through the eyes of the infinite number of results? Not really. It's more like it's a cooperative thing. The external reality works because the soul glances there. The external reality exists because the consciousness which glances in that direction. Wherever the consciousness glances, that exists. And it's facilitated by the power of the super consciousness, but it's required by the attention of the subconsciousness. So in other words, yes, the external reality exists because there's conscious entities who are not aware of Bhagavan. All right, guys. So I'll see you again next. I thought in his previous life he was pursuing Dharma. Where does that fit in this? Right. So in his last life, he was pursuing Dharma. This is why in the next life he gets to be born as a dharmic person. Just look. I covered that already today in today's stream. So just watch this. We watch the stream. Don't be upset about the first 20 seconds or so of the stream, where it is cutting off. The sound is cutting off. Okay, guys, I will see you. That's enough for today.